now at 5:30. A News 5 special report.
Time to go back to school.
Here we go again.
Some fear is coming back.
After unprecedented became the word of the year in 2020. Teachers, parents, and students are gearing up for a second pandemic fall.
This is a public health issue. It's not a political issue.
The classroom, the latest battleground in a polarized America.
Our children.
I can't recall a more divisive time than what we're in right now.
We're clearly well past the time when the state can mandate to parents what actions to take.
At the center of it all, a generation of kids growing up in the age of COVID.
I'm hopeful that the people in charge are going to do what's needed to keep all of us safe.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our News 5 special, Safely Back to School. 1 year ago, a lot of parents were setting up learning spaces in their homes. Fast forward to today, and most kids in Ohio are headed back to the classroom, some for the very first time in a year and a half.
It's been a while for some, and this year the state doesn't have any health orders in place, like a mask mandate. And there's a far more contagious strain of coronavirus going around known as the Delta variant. Today, Ohio's top doctor once again pushed our state to embrace masks and vaccines.
Our goal is to keep our K through 12 students in school in person 5 days a week.
Now today we are digging into all the issues surrounding back to school. We'll hear from kids and their parents about how they're feeling, find out how teachers are preparing for another unprecedented year, and look at how one district is prepared to go all virtual if the need arises. Now we have some breaking news. One of the most passionate debates, we're talking about back to school topics, whether or not to wear a mask. We just learned moments ago, many schools will now be mandating masks in the classroom after initially announcing masks were encouraged. The debate has been heating up school board meetings and dining room tables. And our 5 on Your Side investigator, Sarah Buttison, explains how decisions about your health are now in the hands of educators.
The storm raged outdoors.
And I don't want anyone playing Russian roulette with my kids.
And inside.
This is not a game.
Lights out.
And things could change, but why roll the dice?
Tempers hot.
Our children.
At Rocky River's last school board meeting,
I've been talking to you, Dr. Schoen.
The debate,
as safe as possible.
Should masks be mandated?
In general, the masks do more harm to small children.
Many, like grandmother Karen McGettrick, say masks should be optional.
They touch it, they pull it down, they pick their noses.
We do know that children can get this infection and they can spread it.
Most who spoke out agree with Lynette Karth, a doctor with 2 kids in the district, who says wearing masks,
It's annoying, but is it a big deal?
Should be mandatory.
It saddens me that people don't want to take care of other people.
So, how did health decisions get left to educators? A new Ohio law. Senate Bill 22 gave lawmakers the authority to reject Governor Mike DeWine's health orders. He said, quote, there's not the appetite for a mask mandate. So this pandemic policy falls to each individual school district.
There's a lot of uncertainty.
Peter Zawodzki is an attorney at Walter Haverfield, which represents dozens of Northeast Ohio school districts.
Ultimately, you are a public school district that is supposed to be watching out for the health of everybody within the district's buildings.
He says it's in schools' interest to follow health officials' guidance. The American Academy of Pediatrics, Ohio Department of Health, and CDC recommend students and staff wear masks.
It's best if you could fall back on the fact that you followed the state guidance and you followed the federal guidance.
And another new rule. In Ohio, vaccinated and unvaccinated people must be treated the same.
I can't recall a more divisive time than what we're in right now.
So, Steve Thompson, the superintendent of Willoughby Eastlake Schools, decided on a mask optional policy for now.
I'm hoping that we can create an environment where more students than you would ever think show up in masks.
But most children, please don't interrupt me.
Back in Rocky River, the storm outside subsided.
Our youngest children are also the ones who are most likely to touch their face and reposition their masks.
The one indoors shows no signs of slowing.
Optional masking is like having a no pee section in the pool. Pretty gross.
Rocky River Superintendent proposes making masks mandatory for grades K through 5 since children under 12 cannot be vaccinated, and making masks optional for grades 6 through 12. The school board will vote on that proposal here at the Board of Education tomorrow night. In Rocky River, I'm 5 on Your Side investigator Sarah Buttison.
Our thanks to Sarah. And no matter how this mask debate unfolds in the classrooms, masks on the school bus will be mandatory since they're considered a public transportation mode.
All right, so a key variable this school year is the prominence of the Delta variant. And I want to give you just an idea here of just how contagious this strain is. Bottom line is this: someone sick with the original COVID-19 strain we dealt with all last year when Ohio locked down would infect 3 other people on average. With the Delta strain, a sick person is expected to infect an average of 7 people. For comparison, someone sick with chickenpox spreads it to roughly 10 other people. Now, check out this rate of transmission map here in Ohio. This CDC map shows mostly high rates of COVID-19 transmission happening across Northeast Ohio counties. And speaking of transition, all of that, or transmission rather, that is back on the rise here, and it's no wonder families are feeling very anxious about returning to class.
Last year, 5 on Your Side investigator Jonathan Walsh sat down with some parents and students to talk about learning during the pandemic. Now, he caught back up with them to see what's changed and what hasn't this year.
Welcome back. Here we are again. Show of hands. Who here has had at least one shot for the vaccination? Okay. Mason, how does that make a difference between the last time we talked and now?
I feel a lot more comfortable. Clearly, I'm not wearing my mask as I was last time. I think all of us were.
Well, I feel like nothing has changed from last year of how we need to operate as a family union right now. So while we're protected and his older sister's protected, he has no additional shields.
Mason, what was it like last year having to wear your masks?
I feel like it didn't bother me.
This is my son. He missed school last year, the entire year. He can't afford to lose more in-person social time and teacher time, so he should wear a mask.
I didn't mind it, but I didn't like it at the same time.
Well, it doesn't really affect me too much in general. So I feel like it might get a little hot, but.
Should teachers have to wear masks?
Without a mask, it's just another barrier that's not there. So I think, yes, teachers need to be wearing masks.
Let's talk about variants.
It's scary to think about that with the number of unvaccinated population that we have, that those variants can and will keep catching on.
As he walks into a school building this year, what is your major concern?
My hope is that the teachers have the ability to not wear a mask so the students can be socialized with the teacher and see their expressions on their face, but keep the students far enough away. But that's a big piece of this too, is I want him to have the real teaching experience again.
I worry a little bit about the social distancing.
Was there social distancing when you went back?
There are a lot of kids in school, and it's just a bit harder to, in the hallways, it's a bit harder to social distance.
I'm hopeful that the people in charge are going to do what's needed to keep all of us safe.
Our thanks to Jonathan for that, and we can all agree we want our kids to stay safe this year. So let's take a closer look at how this virus is affecting them. More than 119,000 kids under 18 have gotten sick with COVID here in Ohio. That's about 4.6% of the kids in our state. More than 1,300 ended up in the hospital, and 6 children have died from the virus. Kids under 12 do not have access to the vaccine yet, but as for our older kids, the State Department of Health says nearly 500,000 Ohioans under the age of 20 have started the vaccine process. That's about 15% of our 19 and under population.
There is a lot more to come on our News 5 special report, Safely Back to School. We're taking you back to the roundtable.
Yeah, I'm kind of afraid that I may get COVID, but I'm going to try my best to keep my mask mask on.
We sit down with kids too young to be vaccinated and their parents to talk masks, politics, and school outbreaks.
But first, a look at how COVID could spread in the classroom. This animation from ABC News shows how one infected child can spread viral particles throughout a classroom during a 6-hour day. Now watch how those particles can be flushed out with airflow simply by opening a door or a window. But the kids by the door and window are now in the path of the virus. Teachers should make sure those spaces are clear. Lastly, check out what happens when you add those plastic partitions to the mix. They trap the viral particles, hindering the airflow that flushes them out. We'll be right back. Well, this time last year, no one knew how schools would approach fall sports. Some shut down their programs, and the Ohio High School Athletic Association followed state mandates. Right now, we have no mandates, just recommendations. Here's a look at what that means. Like everyone else, if a student athlete has COVID or is exposed to the virus, they are advised to quarantine for at least 10 days and seek medical care if needed. Now, there's some wiggle room around quarantine. If you're able to produce a negative test result, you could miss 7 days instead of 10. But the test should be taken at least 5 days after exposure. If you're showing symptoms, get tested. We checked with OSHAA, and they say in an event of an entire team having to quarantine, it's up to the schools involved to schedule a makeup game. If they can't work it out, the game will be ruled a no contest. It's up to each team to let student athletes and parents of guardians know about a positive test. If the infected athlete played a game, the team then has to notify any opponents who may be at risk. The past 18 months have been anything but predictable.
I'm excited, but I'm kind of nervous.
Next, teachers are sharing their hopes and anxieties about the new school year.
But first, the top 3 things teachers want parents to do this fall: be patient. This will be an adjustment for everyone involved. Be prepared. If your child isn't already on a back-to-school schedule, start now. And finally, communicate. Teachers are there to support your kids just like you. Don't hesitate to reach out or ask for help. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to our News 5 special report, Safely Back to School. Now, it'll be weeks before the grades are out from spring assessments, but teachers are ready to face all levels of learning loss when kids return to the class.
We have to find out what it is that they know, what it is that we need them to know, and then try to come up with a plan for them to get there.
Teachers from CMSD told us some summer learning loss is normal, but the gap may have grown this year because of the pandemic and the tumultuous 2020 school year.
As much as kids have gone through these past 18 months, do not forget teachers are also going through it too, folks. Whether they've been virtual, stayed in the classroom, or jumped back and forth, they've learned to be ready for anything.
The word change is likely the best word to describe 2020 for this trio of educators. Julia Fabich, Martin Zinway, and Amy Fink.
You can't go into education and not being willing to adapt.
A, B, C, D. All 3 teach totally different subjects, grades, and come from different districts. But in the age of COVID-19, there's one thing they all have in common.
Because things, as we saw last year, changed every day, even sometimes within hours. You know, things changed all the time. D-dog, d-d-d.
And walking into a new school year, things are still changing. For Fabich, a first-grade teacher in Canton City Schools, the change is more so functional. She's using this vowel board since the youngsters can't see her mouth.
Our mouth is wide open. Oh!
The masks you see here are required in the district. But this spirit of fluctuation hasn't been the easiest on most teachers, like Zinway.
Was being a teacher this past year tough on your mental health? Was it tough for you?
Yes. I'm a parent also, so I have 2 kids, both in school. So I had to be at home teaching them and teaching my students.
The Rand Corporation says prior to the pandemic, 1 in 6 teachers will likely leave the profession. But during the pandemic, it jumped to 1 in 4 teachers. So this fall, Zinway says he needs parents to change their thinking and share the weight.
You know, we have to be a partner in this. Don't just depend on the teachers for everything. You have to play your part.
Fink, a middle school math teacher in Parma, tells me structure and empathy are the core of her lesson plan. So while her approach to teaching is changing, what she requires of her students isn't wavering.
I mean, it's not that you lower your expectations or you change your expectations, but how you get there may look a little differently. I think that's the key, is just to keep those expectations high, and there's always going to be challenges, and we just got to figure out a way to make it work.
This fall, all of these educators say they're prepared to send their students to a destination of success, but they need parents and students to be ready for anything as they make the trip.
Yeah, with every problem comes a solution. We just got to figure out what it is and make it work. And if it doesn't work, we try something else.
So, one major problem facing school districts this year is there's no vaccine for kids under 12, meaning an elementary school lunch period has the potential to become a super spreader event.
And 5 on Your Side investigator Jonathan Walsh is back with a second group of parents and kids who are too young to be vaccinated.
What are your concerns going into this school year?
They do a lot better learning in person. So for me, it's important that they can be at school learning in person, but do it in a way that's safe for them, safe for the community at large.
If they are not wearing masks and there is an exposure, then you're talking about how many people are being quarantined. At what point is it the whole class? At what point then is this a disruption to the school year?
I'm kind of afraid that I may get COVID, but I'm going to try my best to keep my mask on.
There's a big debate about masks. Should they wear them? Should they not? What's your perspective?
I feel that if there's a chance of it working, it's better to use it than to not.
What I really think is wearing a mask, it's helping others, not getting my germs on them. And when other people wear a mask, they help me.
As a student who is not yet eligible for the vaccine, how do you feel about other kids being eligible and then you're not?
So I feel sometimes it could be a little like, you're vaccinated, I'm not, you can't do this.
I'm okay doing it, taking our time and doing it right and listening to the experts.
For me, I have these children that can't be vaccinated, and so I think taking precautions like wearing masks, getting vaccinated yourself if you're eligible to, are important ways to keep these children that aren't able to keep them safe.
We've got this data that says, okay, we know it's safe for this group, let's make sure it's safe for the younger people. That gives me comfort.
Somehow this became political. Whether you wear a mask, whether you get a vaccine, what are your thoughts?
This is a public health issue, it's not a political issue.
I find it frustrating. I feel that science should be what people are following.
Do you worry that parents will send kids to school with COVID?
It is hard because you want to trust other parents, but there are people who do not believe that this is a big deal.
I don't really know if one kid could feel totally fine, have COVID, one kid could have a fever, not have COVID, and then that could be a danger for me, and I don't want to get COVID.
In 2020, Northeast Ohio's digital divide grew even deeper when schools shut down and kids were sent home to learn.
We found out that like 300,000 households were without basic internet service.
Now, one school district says it won't be caught unprepared again.
And it looks like online learning is here to stay. In 2020, the state set aside more than $193 million to help Northeast Ohio schools weather the pandemic and follow the state's remote learning plan. In 2021, schools have been asked to design online learning schools for kids learning from home. We found out 65 schools across Northeast Ohio have reached out to the state about creating an online learning school. Unlike the remote learning plan, the state says any district creating an online learning school should approach it with a sense of permanency and longevity.
So it's not often we get the benefit of foresight, but over the past couple of weeks, we've seen what it looks like for schools to reopen without masks in the classroom. Long story short, a lot of kids are being sent home. And we found out some local districts have plans in place for students to keep up with their schoolwork online if they have to quarantine.
But at least one school district is going a lot further. As News 5's Jordan Vandenberg reports, East Cleveland is closing the digital divide for both students and their families.
Chambers Elementary in East Cleveland has held its last class, but Jewel Heath is here.
We're not just enrolling a student, we're enrolling a family.
To make sure it stays connected.
This is my 4th week, which we probably should not say.
With fresh coats of paint and through grants from the Cleveland Browns and others, the once shuttered school will become the Parent Empowerment Center. The center aims to bridge divides of all kinds, but especially the digital one, exposed by the pandemic.
A lot of students, a lot of children were teaching their parents and grandparents how to use the same technology.
Although the district has swapped notebooks for Chromebooks, it's the Empowerment Center that will allow families like the Mohammeds
How do you go to school?
Online.
to learn remotely without feeling remote.
It's important. Our entertainment, education, and overall work and stuff, so it's important.
Having a technology hub like this and having the computer labs, if we were, God forbid, to have to go back to being virtual, it puts us at a great advantage.
The networks that matter in this case aren't necessarily technical, but rather
Hi, Lennox, how are you?
human.
We started our own wireless internet service. We're going around letting people know about it.
And what a better way to introduce a new service
Do you want ice cream too?
than through ice cream.
East Cleveland in particular, as a neighborhood, has been redlined and not invested in for years.
But PCs for People has invested. Using towers atop the city schools, the nonprofit recently launched a new internet service in East Cleveland, featuring speeds 10 times faster at less than half the price.
If you want to pay for your second month, which is $15, you can get a free laptop.
In and out of the classroom, those connections have been strengthened.
It's not just if you build it, they will come, right? It's about having an internet solution, having the devices, the support, and really that holistic approach.
In East Cleveland, Jordan Vandenberg, News 5.
Oh my gosh, I love that story.
Yeah, I did too. And the ice cream. Well, thanks so much for joining us this evening for this News 5 special report, Safely Back to School.